Okay. So, a handful of years ago, a fire blew through this area that I'm standing on right now. It was the Marshall Fire. It happened towards the end of 2021, and to date, it is still the most destructive wildfire in Colorado's history. Today, the grass has grown back. Largely, the land looks similar to what it looked like before 2021, and a lot of structures have been rebuilt. Still, you see some vacant lots here and there, but largely, if you didn't know that a fire blew through this area, you wouldn't know that it ever did. Today, right where I am, is this bench. This bench, I can only assume, wasn't here before 2021. I think it must have come after. It's made out of plastic, so I, I figure it would have melted. But I came across this bench a handful of months ago in sort of a confused and uncertain part of my life. I didn't know where I was going at all. I was completely lost. I came across this bench on this mountain bike trail that I used to love to ride with this view that looks out towards the Front Range, the Rocky Mountains. I sat here for a little bit. I came through on my mountain bike and decided to sit and just look. Now, looking out this way towards the mountains, I saw some immense beauty before me, but didn't take a moment to really appreciate it at all. I was too lost in the sort of circuitry of uncertainty. It was only when I decided to sort of consciously look back that I saw this bench has a plaque. The plaque reads, "Those who contemplate the beauty of earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts." Now, this quote comes from Rachel Carson, and embarrassingly, I didn't know who Rachel Carson was when I first read this quote. Now I do. She was absolutely badass. She was a biologist, and she is essentially credited with starting the modern day environmental movement. She was remarkable. If you don't know anything about her, I would definitely suggest reading up on her history. But it was only because I found this bench and therefore found this plaque that I read this quote and decided, wait a second, I know it's simple, but the truth is, if I can just take a moment to think about what it is before me, which is this beautiful range of mountains, then everything will be okay. I'll find reserves of strength that can push me through this moment of uncertainty. Little did I know that within a few days of me visiting this bench for the first time, I would discover that I had gotten into grad school. I would become a student of film, science filmmaking in particular, which is precisely what I want to do. So it took quite a bit of uncertainty, a long time where I just didn't know who I was or what I wanted to be doing, for that wave function to finally collapse and me to learn that I would be going to Montana. Within some 5 months, I would no longer be sitting before this mountain range that I have found myself in for the past 20 years. Now, I've been waiting for that wave function to collapse for quite some time. I've been waiting to learn about whether or not the cat, so to speak, was dead or alive. And I found out that it was alive. I found out that I would be doing what I was hoping I would be able to do. I'm getting to chase that dream. Now, this has me thinking a lot about discovery, both personal and sort of cultural, scientific, historical, whatever you want to fill in that variable for. But I've come to realize that discovery is a lot like climbing a tree by its leaves. That is to say, it requires a lot of work, and for a long time it'll feel like you're not doing anything. But if you grasp at enough leaves, you'll start to grasp at some branches, and you'll start to grasp at some reality. You'll start to grasp at something that you can actually pull yourself up on. This has been true for me since graduating from university, where I don't know what tree I'm climbing. I don't know where I'm trying to go, but I've been grasping at leaves nonetheless. Science is no different. They say that scientific progress happens one death at a time, which is grim, but quite true. Humans have a tendency to get locked into dogma about their own sort of belief systems. They think that they're right and everybody else must be wrong. Science therefore progresses by sort of removing that dogma one death at a time, which is hardcore, but there seems to be no other way for people to remain open-minded enough that actual progress can take place within generations rather than between them. Of course, that's not universally true, but as far as large progress, climbing the whole tree, it's a bunch of individual people grasping at leaves so that maybe someday in future generations we can make it to the top of the tree. Now, I don't know what this actually means. It's just a metaphor that came to me probably on a walk or something. I don't remember where it exactly came from. But thinking about this metaphor has kind of reminded me how pessimistically I tend to think about progress. I tend to think about progress as slow. You work for sort of a long time to discover who you are, who you want to be. You work for a long time to discover these scientific truths about the world. But as an individual, on the individual scale, it feels like you're just grasping at leaves. They're just pulling right off the branches and you're not actually growing. But that growth happens eventually. If you grasp at enough leaves, like I said, you start to grab onto branches and you start to be able to actually pull yourself up. So that development, as sort of slow and futile as it seems, is still development. So long as you remember to grasp at leaves, you will continue to grow. Now, I think about this too in the circumstance of this land I'm on, this place that was completely incinerated some 4 years ago. This land and the community, my community, was devastated by a fire that was started by power lines and some fire that was on the land of a cult a few miles away. The spring before that fire had been particularly wet and was followed by a particularly dry summer, which meant that there had been a lot of growth, immediate, quick growth, that then shriveled up and turned into kindling that following summer. All it would take was a spark, and we had two. Those two sparks didn't come until December, ironically enough, and within a couple of days it destroyed more land and property than any other fire in Colorado's history. 2 people died. Thousands of pets and livestock died. 1,000 properties were destroyed. So the growth of that spring, all it took was a couple of sparks to turn Colorado into kindling. Now, as I said earlier, the land and the people have largely recovered. Of course, this area will never be exactly the same, but within reason, fire is a natural part of Colorado's ecology. It's how pine cones unfurl their seeds. And I'm sure for a while after the fire, most of the community felt like they were grasping at leaves. They felt like they were working so hard to make progress, to build back to where we were, and they probably felt like they weren't making any progress at all. But today, from the outside perspective, it seems like this place is somewhat back to normal. Of course, like I said, it will never be exactly back to normal, but it's here. There's this bench with the reminder to find reserves of strength in the beauty that surrounds us. As strange as it seems, there is beauty in the conflagration as well. There's beauty in the resetting of this land followed by the growth that took place afterwards. So long as we can find the beauty in the landscape, we'll find reserves of strength that we never knew we had. Thank you, Rachel Carson.